Hello everybody, welcome to Baseball Outside the Box. I'm your host Pete Caliendo. This is the tip of the day. Listen, first of all, quick shout out to my good friend Gus Rodriguez. He is the head of umpires internationally for the World Baseball Softball Confederation. Been working with him quite a few years. He always sends me a text. He listens to the tips. He likes them. He encourages me to keep going. So Gus, thank you very much. As an umpire, you listen to Gus to one of our prior episodes on Baseball Outside the Box. Glad to see that he is listening to the tips, and he encourages everybody to listen to him in the game of baseball. We're just getting started. These are just some basic tips. We're getting rolling every day. But check us out also on baseballoutsidethebox.com, our podcast. We just finished a great episode with the director of coaching in Cuba. He trains coaches all over Cuba, 322 seminars in 20 years he has held there. And we just got back and we did a nice podcast there talking about Cuban baseball. If you love to hear about Cuban baseball, the inner makings of it, why they're so good around the world internationally, with only about 60,000 players in their country. They've got a great system. Listen to the interview. If you got any questions about it, I know there's some broken English there a little bit, but a lot better than my Spanish. Mr. Barroso speaks very good English, and if you got any questions about some of the things we talked about, email me at petercaliendo@att.net. Again, petercaliendo@att.net. Today's tip of the day: since the season's going on, I'm a big believer that you can train your kids at all ages throughout the year, during the season, especially during games. I hear a lot of coaches say, well, how do I keep kids' attention during a game, or how do I keep them busy? They're not all playing. Well, you have various ways to do that. We're not going to get into all of them, but you can check out some of our podcasts that have that information. But we'll have it as a tip of the day probably throughout the season, because it is something that involves during the season. So let's talk about what you can do to maintain some fundamentals, whether they be skills or whether it be fundamentals of the game, playing the actual game during games. There's a lot of wasted time during games where players aren't doing much. One of them is between innings, when the pitcher's warming up. He's got about 8 pitches, roughly around the world. The average, some have gone down to 6, some 4, depending where you're from. But you do have so many pitches. There's certain things that you do. You take ground balls from the first baseman. We'll discuss that another tip of the day. But today's tip of the day is training your middle infielders for every inning. When the catcher throws the ball down to second base, what I've seen all over the world is that the second baseman, shortstop, one's always at the base ready to receive the ball, and the other one is backing them up. They're already there. They've been there. They're waiting for the catcher to catch the ball and throw it down. And for me, that's a waste of time. I think we can utilize that time to actually practice the skill. I was a middle infielder, second baseman, shortstop, was not very fast, had to think more, had to anticipate. Well, at the same time, you've got to think about when you're playing that position, you got a man on first that's pretty fast, a runner at first. I wasn't very fast. I needed to get to the base. I needed to know my abilities to get to the base. But I also needed to practice that, because 1, it's about getting to the base. 2, it's catching the ball. 3, it's putting the tag down, and it happens very fast, and you got a runner bearing down on you. If you're coming from second base, he's coming your way. If you're coming from shortstop, you can see where the runner is. But what I think is very difficult is actually getting the base, catching and tagging at the same time, trying to put that tag down. Yes, we're trying to get there early. We're not always there early. Our timing's off. But prior to that, we got to make sure the ball's not hit our way. So we've got to, have a forward slight movement where you be taking a couple steps in, read the ball, make sure it's not hit, and then break to the base to go cover the base. Well, when you're going to practice this difficult skill, if you think that's easy, try it. It's not easy, especially in real game situations. So one area you can do it is when the pitcher's done throwing the last pitch and the catcher's going to be ready to throw down the second, have your second baseman, shortstops practice that like a real game. So they'll break to the base the way they should, according to what happened in the ball game. So that's a great time to practice that. Now, you might get 8 innings. If you have a 9-inning game, you might be doing that 8 times. Well, 8 times so many games, you're going to get better and better and better. Now, continue to listen to Baseball Outside the Box tip of the day, because that's just a very small tip. We're going to get into a lot more than that when it comes to the catcher throwing down. there's other things that the catcher can do, and other people in the infield, what they should be practicing also between innings. So we'll talk about that on the next tip of the day. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo, Baseball Outside the Box, and thanks for joining us today for Tip of the Day.